Springbank 10-year Campbeltown single malt Scotch whiskey. Is this a must-buy? Check out the Whiskey Whistle. Hey everybody, why don't you come with me to the Scottish Highlands? It's gonna be a blast. What up my whiskey people, Mark here from Whiskey Whistle on YouTube, sharing a little whiskey awesomeness from Winnipeg, the center of North America, bringing you Springbank 10-year Campbeltown single malt Scotch whiskey. Is this one you must have? Let's find out today as we re-review this one. Oh, tiny little squeak there. Brand new packaging for me anyway. The last time I reviewed this, it had a black sort of motif. Very simple packaging, and it still is just a little bit of color and almost like a rubberized cardboard or embossed. I don't know how they do that, but it feels pretty silky. It almost feels waterproof. Oh, finally. As you can see, there's another Springbank next door, which is Springbank 14, and there's not much left, but just enough to review. And then there's 2 samples of that have to get to some members of the Winnipeg Whiskey Club that couldn't make the event last month in May 2019 for the Springbank event, which was called Copper Night 1, sponsored by a good friend of mine who runs Hardwired Electric. Hey Rory, I think I'm going to pour this right away so it has a bit of time to breathe. This one is aged all in bourbon wood. Just cannot get anything to squeak today. Nope, no squeaking. I think it's summertime. It's a little humid here. So there's no squeaks. Just a tiny bit because, again, that has to get to people. Is that enough? I think I need to have a little more. All right. Make sure I keep those straight. These are all natural in color. The 10-year is 46% ABV, natural color, unchill filtered. We'll get into that 14-year for the next review, so stay tuned for that one. Make sure I have those right. Okay, so we got the 10-year at the ready there. Now, before we get started, make sure you check out what I've laid out right there, which is what's coming up later this year in November 10th to 18th. The Whiskey Whistle Highland Malt Expedition. I'll leave a little link right over here. I'd love to have you along with me. With Springbank, we're going to check out the color of the whiskey. We will check out the legs also. What kind of legs does Springbank 10 have? Then we will, of course, check out the nose, the palate, and the finish before we give it a Whiskey Whistle Whisky Score for 2019. The color, what do you see there for color? It's got a pretty nice shade for 10 years old. In fact, it's almost like amber plus 1, a little bit more than just your standard whiskey hue. So a beautiful shade, and we can really enjoy it because it's all natural. Next, let's check out the legs of Springbank 10 from the Campbeltown region. One of only Lowlands, Highlands, Speyside, Campbeltown, 5 regions of Scotland. And there is a pseudo 6th region, which is called the Islands. But however, there really isn't an Islands region, legally speaking. We could say there is a separate region in terms of terroir, in terms of how they are made. But in fact, legally, there's only 5. All right. Springbank 10 legs, very well defined, very thick, luscious looking legs. Look at that. It's all over the glass. And well, that should mean it has a nice mouthfeel. So let's verify that in a minute. And we'll get onto the nose of Springbank 10. It's really quite potent. One thing you really have to consider with Springbank is that, well, it's not a huge distillery, so there's more copper contact with the liquid. They also use more than one still, more than two stills probably. They use 3 stills. Springbank is 2.5 times distilled. In fact, it might be 2 point something, 2.8 or whatever, in fact. So lots of extra copper contact, which is supposed to bring about a more luscious flavor in whiskey, interestingly. If you think about copper and you smell whiskey, yeah, there's kind of a something, kind of like a coppery something going on there. I'm sure that there's a little bit of copper in the whiskey. Anyway, so lots of copper contact. Another interesting thing about Springbank is the fact that they direct fire. What that does is, well, some of the stuff inside the still will actually get a little bit burnt, and this also influences how the distillate tastes in the end. So when I smell this now, I'm getting some cigar tobacco leaves. The outside leaf, what's it called? The outermost leaf on a cigar, on a nice cigar, has that particular, just sort of a nice, fresh aroma of the forest, a little bit of the cedar box that they usually come in. There's also usually a little bit of a cedar sleeve alongside that cigar. So there's a slight hint of that kind of tobacco leaf. And then we get lots of nice caramel, salty caramels. Also important to remember that Springbank is right next to the ocean. Well, very close anyway. So it's a coastal distillery. Beautiful nose. Not a lot of cinnamon, a little bit more to the nutmeg end of things. I'm not getting any ginger here whatsoever. Vanilla bean. Quite a nice nose. And it really comes off as older than 10 years old. This really smells more like 12, 13, maybe even 14 years old. Beautiful. Well, we'll get back into that as we taste. Let's check out the palate now. Cheers, everybody, and a big cheers to the Winnipeg Whiskey Club. Cheers, guys and gals. And it is very mouth coating, and it really fills the mouth altogether. It takes over your senses in many ways. It really runs the gamut of fruit. Every which kind of fruit is in there. In fact, a lot of tropical fruits, which is very interesting. So some pineapple, some nice cooked bananas, a little bit of maybe a stone fruit in there, cooked apples, poached pears, and a big dollop of ice cream, vanilla ice cream. A slight bit of astringency, but in an effective way to balance out that heavy sweetness. And it's very rich. Now, one thing I notice, pardon me, compared to the last time I reviewed this, is that I get a little bit less peat in this Springbank than I recall. And I recall having a little bit more like ashy tobacco. And this is a little bit more fruity. And this seems to be very much in the story with what's happening with most whiskeys today. Sort of stepping up the sweetness and dialing back some of those harder to fall in love with flavors, we'll say. But of course, these are flavors that I love. So I kind of miss that ashy, peaty, cigar ashy scent and flavor. But very well put together. The finish, however, is where you do get a couple puffs of peat, and those are very much kind of like this sort of expensive Cuban cigar ash and burnt out to like the nub, you know, the burnt out end. And all those nicely stewed fruits carry right through to the finish. And the more you drink it, that you get that little bit of a waft of peat from the swallowing. The finish carries into the palate for the next time you taste it. And as your tongue gets used to the ABV, to the alcohol strength, you begin to really enjoy all of those delicate fruit flavors and tropical fruit flavors and rich spices and vanillas that are in here. Definitely a whiskey to have in your collection, if not all the time, at least once. Okay, so we're going to add a bit of water there. I'm going to put in one and a little bit because this is a very potent whiskey. 46% ABV, and it acts more like about 48. Let that sit there for a minute. I think I need a whiskey hat on my Springbank 14 so it doesn't dissipate. Take a quick preview. Oh yeah. I tell you what though, if you get one of these, and I know they're pretty much gone from shelves, unless you're in Alberta, but this Springbank 14 is probably one of the whiskeys for me that absolutely needs the most possible time to oxidize in the bottle and even in your glass. So open it, maybe, I don't know, maybe decant it, or, pardon me, open and close it a few times. Try to shake some air through to promote oxidation in the glass. Leave it in there, walk away, come back in an hour, 1 hour minimum for that one. Now, Campbeltown, however, will not be on the Highland Malt Expedition for 2019. Campbeltown will be covered along with, other distilleries. I believe Campbeltown will be featured in with Speyside. Yeah, probably with Speyside. Speyside and Campbeltown. We'll see. I'm hoping to make this a regular thing. So if this gets off the ground and we have a great time in the Highlands in November, then there'll be something coming, say, next May, June, in Isla. Yes, I'm loving this mic. Okay. All right, so the water's been integrated. Slow things down a bit here. The water really brings out the fruit and tones down that flintiness. But it's still very potent, and you could add more. I think I'll leave it for now, just because I know the direction it'll take. So if you add a bit more water, you eventually get basically just like a fruit compote with vanilla ice cream. Beautiful. And it's Campbeltown to the core. My 2019 WhiskyWhistle Whiskey of the Year actually was not Campbeltown, but this was Loch Lomond, which is a Highland distillery, but really acts like a Campbeltown, which is interesting. And they also own Glen Scotia, which is a bona fide Campbeltown distillery. So it seems as though the Loch Lomond group is recognizing that Campbeltown and that style of whiskey really packs a double punch for people that want the best of both worlds. They want the fruit, but they also want a little bit of the peat story along with it. Anyway, this is definitely not to be trifled with. It's got a very, very rich, strong, scented, fruity. The peat's coming through a bit now. All right, anyways, Palate here with water. Cheers again. You get a little bit more access to the fruit. But interestingly, the water actually brings about a smokier flavor, which is usually the opposite. Usually the addition of water reduces the peat, but in this case, it actually brings it about. Certainly less astringent now. A little bit more juicy. With water, yeah, this is really approaching the ideal, at least for me anyway, the ideal strength for that Springbank. This water, by the way, this is distilled water. I've made a switch from using spring water to distilled, and I did that on the advice. So look at the Campbeltown mist we've got going on there, a little bit cloudy. On the advice of ScotchWhiskey.com, did an article, and I kind of knew about it. And yeah, I kind of knew that the alkaline nature of the spring water would affect the flavor somewhat, but I thought, well, it'll be minimal. And anyway, so just to keep things true, I'm using distilled water, and I think it's economical. You get a big jug for about $2 in Canada. Or you could distill your own water. I'm getting a little bit of berry coming through now with water added. Just a generic berry flavor. Kind of like strawberry jam. Strawberry, raspberry, this kind of a flavor coming through, and that's quite nice. And I think that would increase even more with the addition of extra water. All right, well, anyway, time to get on to the WhiskyWhistle Whiskey Score for Springbank 10-year-old Campbeltown Single Malt Scotch Whiskey. What's that going to be? Well, folks, for Springbank 10 in 2019, the WhiskyWhistle Whiskey Score is going to be 90 out of 100. Yep, you heard it. 90 out of 100 is the WhiskyWhistle Whiskey Score for Springbank 10. I have no recollection of what my score was the first time. You can check that out. Probably it was similar. and I think it does a really good job of putting a lot of whiskey in a bottle for relatively not much money, because it is 46% ABV. So you're getting some additional whiskey added, cask strength whiskey. More of that is in there. Things like your Glenmorangie, Glenfiddich, Glenlivet, they're 40%. Yes, they're less expensive, but when we compare dollars to dollars, apples to apples, they're going to be in the ballpark the same price. So this was 112-ish, but great value for that price. I hope you enjoyed that. 90 points out of 100 for Springbank. Don't forget to click this little emblem here to subscribe to Whiskey Whistle. Click the bell so you're notified of the future Whiskey Whistles. And if you're in Winnipeg, then check out the Winnipeg Whiskey Club. Come join us. After today anyway, June 26th is the next meet. Then July 31st and August, the last Wednesday in August anyway, the last Wednesday of each month. So winnipegwhiskeyclub.com, or you can check us out on Facebook, Winnipeg Whiskey Club and Friends. And wherever you are, you can join the Winnipeg Whiskey Club and Friends Facebook group. Share your whiskey stories, and if you happen to be in Winnipeg and it's the last Wednesday of the month, then contact us and you can come as a guest. All right. The tour, check that out. Whiskey Whistle Highland Malt Expedition. The link is in the description. All right. And lastly, if you like what I'm doing here, why not support Whiskey Whistle? Join the Whiskey Whistle crew at patreon.com/Whiskey Whistle. Okay. Take care, everybody. We'll see you next time. Goodbye. Thanks for watching Whiskey Whistle. Be sure to subscribe, and don't forget to give this video a like and leave a comment down below. Be sure to stay tuned next time to join me, the host of the show, Mark, as I explore more whiskeys with you. Take care now, and we'll see you next time.